Hello, hello. You are tuning in to The Accelerator. I'm your host, Lera Kooper, and true to the word, The Accelerator, we're here to make the most of your business, to work on it rather than in it. And today we have a special guest, also from the Seattle area, Laurie Nichols, and she is a trusted guide and confidant to business owners seeking a successful ownership transition. And I'm going to hand it off to you now, Laurie. Thank you for joining, by the way, to really dive into what this means for business owners.
Well, thank you, Lara. It's great to be here and talk about something that I feel like does not get enough attention.
Mhm.
I know that a lot of business owners do have dreams of successful exits. And so often those dreams are really centered around achieving whether it's an ROI objective
Mhm.
or some, major financial objective that reflects their hard work and the investment of the classic blood, sweat, and tears over years into their business. And, having been in their shoes or certainly similar shoes, I recognize that that is a worthy goal. And yet, my belief is that when you really tap into what matters most to you, whether it's when you started your business or now at whatever age you are, there's probably a deeper reward that's possible when you think about your business, whether it's the just in addition to a financial reward, but it could be legacy. It could be just having built a great business with great people and all those kinds of things. And so I've really centered my business and my offer, if you will, my mission to really helping people, the people that are business owners and the people that are potential successors or buyers of businesses, get themselves ready as people, get their teams ready as people for what is not only an exhilarating ride potentially, but can be a very emotional experience, especially for business owners where it's personal. Their
It is.
business is an extension of themselves.
Absolutely. If you consider how much of your time is spent on the business, and then if you consider how much of your mental energy is considered on the
Mhm.
business, it's
Absolutely.
hard to detach yourself from the business itself, especially if you started it from the ground up. And before we dive into an interesting question, which is, when you went through this process, what was the biggest surprise to you? I do want to take it a step back. And so people get a chance to understand who you are before these experiences. And so tell me, just going into business, did you receive any advice along the way? I always like to ask, did you get any, do you remember any worst advice or best advice? Because I'm guessing that those two pieces of information have led to where you are now.
It's really interesting because I am, I would say, a late baby boomer. And so, just based on the fact that I'm a woman of a certain age who entered especially the investment arena at the time that I did, there weren't a lot of us. And so when I got the opportunity to become not only a principal in my former firm, but my now former partners asked if I'd be up for making the big leap of doing a management buyout from the bank that owned the company at the time. And I didn't really have a lot, I didn't really have anybody I'd consider a mentor at the time. But I do think back to even when I was in college, the one of the accounting professors that I had, her saying, get the most education that you can get the most, just really go for it in terms of taking risks and doing the hard things and some of those things. And it kind of all came together when that opportunity came up. I was terrified, actually. I was quite a bit younger than my partners at the time. And so I always feel like I've kind of been in both shoes, not quite the founder, but there at the very, very beginning, and also junior to the people that were really initially leading the business. And so it's just to really feel the fear and take a leap anyway,
That's
is the way
good.
I would put it.
Yeah, that's really good advice because I think everyone has something to be scared of. And so it's probably that mindset of do the research, learn everything you can to at least have a little bit of confidence in the fear.
Yeah, yeah. And to just know too that, for most of the time, we're going to be able to figure stuff out. And just, over the years of running the business and tackling and challenges and navigating changes and all that kind of stuff, it's normal. It's to be expected because for
Mhm.
most business owners, there's no final destination. It is navigation, navigation, navigation.
That's good. That's true. Yeah. We think we have a destination and then you navigate and you realize maybe the goal wasn't big enough or maybe it just was unrealistic and you have to pivot or something happens to you out of your control. And again, it's just staying afloat.
And
So
part of it is also kind of that next level, whatever that next level is. So there's very few, because most of my clients now are also privately owned businesses. There's very few businesses where you're done. I mean, if you've got that kind of a mindset, as soon as I hit such and such a goal, whether it's revenue or headcount or whatever it is, most people it's some kind of revenue goal. Um, there's still competition. There's all kinds of things that going on that make it challenging to stay at that level.
that is
And
true.
so it's navigation, navigation, navigation. And I would say navigation within that context, or, depending on the kind of business it is, whatever environment you've created in terms of the people that are working
Mhm.
for you, with you, maybe business partners that you engage with along the way. And now there's just so many more people involved, and it just becomes more and more complicated the more people there are.
It's true. It really is. And that segues really well into that first question that I mentioned, which is what is the biggest surprise that you came across when you did sell your business?
I would say the biggest surprise was really how much goes unsaid. In my case, I had two business partners, and we had actually had a fantastic business attorney on our side who helped tremendously with both our original shareholder agreement as well as in navigating the just the details relative to the transaction that I believed we were all committed to executing, but how much of a roller coaster it really was. Each of us experienced it in our own way, much of it privately. We'd
Mhm.
been business partners for many, many years, and yet it was just really interesting at this moment when it's all kind of coming together. In fact, one of my partners had a health issue, and so his reason for wanting to exit and all of that was certainly impacted by the experience that he had had, and our individual ages played a part, and like by that I mean kind of stage of life. There's all
Mhm.
these different things that came into play alongside of wanting to maximize the return on our investment and exit with what felt like a great valuation. And so it's just realizing that the hardest part of it was the people-y part. It's the interactions and the relationships between business partners. It's not knowing whether you can really trust the people that are buying the firm, and then you get in your head and it's kind of like, well, maybe we shouldn't do it. you know
Yeah,
and so
well,
how many times we almost individually or collectively kind of sabotaged the effort. And so I would say that was the biggest surprise, was just recognizing that even though we've known each other and worked alongside each other for so many years, how uncomfortable it was being candid about what our real goals were, and trying to figure out how do we best get aligned in those goals
Yeah.
and getting through it and on the other side of the transaction kind of intact as people and ideally having a good relationship ongoing with the company that acquired our firm. And
Mhm.
so it's just, again, it's an emotional process. It's even for people that pride themselves on good communication, you could be making a big assumption on what your partners or your key employees are really thinking and wanting in that moment when so much is at stake.
Yeah, no, that's the emotional burden is heavy when you're going through a life change like that,
Mhm.
especially when numbers are not the only thing worth considering. You know, when I talk about using your resources or maximizing your exit, that doesn't always mean dollars. Sometimes it means finishing the project while still having some sanity left or some
Exactly.
energy. You mentioned communication and you know, having this discomfort around conversations, around the
Mhm.
alignment of your goals as owners. Did you have that type of conversation when you partnered together in the beginning about here's our goals, you know, personally through the firm itself, here's our goals for exit, or did you come together for another reason and then you know, it wasn't until you started exiting that you learned these things about your partner?
It was pretty much all along that there was this, in the beginning, um, the trust that I had in, especially the partner who was really taking the lead on the management buyout and that, um, it, certainly in initiating it and recognizing pretty early on that even though he's this Harvard MBA guy, I was not, but that we complemented each other so well in terms of um, the parts that each of us needed to play, even for that initial transaction to happen successfully.
That's
And
great.
so a lot of this I didn't fully realize and maybe celebrate in myself until decades later, which is that, yes, complementary skills and abilities are so important, and that really communication is happening all the time, whether there's words coming out of our mouths or not.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good
so,
soundbite.
it's knowing that even when I didn't have the courage to be candid or direct, um, and that was the case for a lot of the time, that my instincts were typically correct in a lot of those moments. And so as I got, you know, as the decades kind of ticked by, and we had this opportunity to do a transaction, that's when it just became so much more important that not just I'm more vocal, but that we have these conversations. Because initially it's just, we want to grow. And okay, growing is a great goal. And most
What does
business
it
owners,
mean
but
and
it's,
how?
what does that mean and how and with whom? And,
What
just,
expense?
yes, there are just all these things that we didn't think about, or we may have thought about, but we didn't make the time for those kinds of strategic conversations. And you hear about people doing like an offsite for strategic meetings and stuff like that.
Mhm.
You know, that's one of the lessons learned too, that if you if you see the value in that, and I would say to business owners that if you're not willing to, or you don't value that kind of time for strategic thinking, reflecting on what's working, what's not, bigger picture kinds of stuff,
Mhm.
then you're probably not serious as a business owner. You could be successful in spite of yourself, but you're going to have more challenges in terms of bringing really great people along with you, especially now. People have a lot of options, especially very talented people. I've tended to work a lot with what I call professionals. So whether it's financial people, attorneys, accountants, people like that. And any professionals in those professional service firms have choices. And so leadership does matter, and having a willingness to really invest in your own leadership abilities. And by investing, that could simply be carving out time
You're
for
absolutely right.
working on your business, not just in it. And so, and all of this makes a difference when it comes to thinking about, am I going to try to sell? Am I going to look for a merger partner? So some kind of an M&A transaction. And am I going to attempt to do some kind of an internal succession event? All of those are really impacted by how you grow, how you lead, how you manage, the kind of people you hire. All of
Mhm.
that is impacted by those decisions that you make way in advance of the actual event of you transitioning out of your business.
Mhm. I recently heard the term, business by design, not business by default. And you're right. Some people are successful despite themselves, but and I have this little a short video on our YouTube talking about, are you a hobbyist or a business owner? Like if you view your business like an investment, that means you're doing those things. You're spending time to develop yourself as a leader, to develop the company, to scale it,
Mhm.
for to essentially be replaceable eventually. Or do you view your business like a job? Because at that rate, it is just a job. Or, if you're depending on inspiration to do any business development, then probably more of a hobby. And so you've talked about some of the successful or some of the criteria that lend towards successful outcomes. But what are some of the common mistakes that you see made?
I would say it's kind of connected to what I just shared, which is not prioritizing time for what I call, that CEO time. No matter
Yeah.
what size the business is,
Hmm.
CEO time in my mind, I've always been a big fan of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and
Hmm.
the Stephen Covey principles in that book. But there's I know he wasn't the creator of it, but it's the quadrants, and how uh, quadrant one is where everything's urgent and
Hmm.
important. And most business owners, whether it's by design or by default, are always in that quadrant one, or kind of wasting time potentially in things that really aren't urgent or important. But big picture strategic thinking, investing in relationships with your key, what I call stakeholders, and your business being successful, whether that's clients, oh gosh, COIs, key employees, your personal assistant you've had for 20 years. But it's making time for these very important. They're not urgent, but these activities that become urgent because they've been ignored.
That's a good point.
And
Yeah.
like succession planning. So what does if my ideal scenario is internal succession, and my ideal timeline is 8 years from now, I can't say I'll just put that on my to-do list 7 years from now. I mean, you could, and you may still get lucky
And
depending
people
on
do.
yeah, and depending on the kind of business, it's like you probably, if it's got great cash flow and all those kinds of things, you probably will be able to find a buyer. But the challenge is you limit your options when in my view, if you've not led and managed and grown your business aligned with whatever that future aspiration is,
Hmm.
and how much of that is really um, oh gosh, it's your people strategy, if you will. How much do you invest in that? How much do you think about who are the right kind of people to have on a team that is going to support that larger goal of building something that's going to have great value and be in demand, and where people are going to want to work here,
Mhm.
where people are going to want to be future partners and that kind of stuff. And not thinking about your people as a real asset, and not engaging with your people in ways that help you to actually know what's important to them as well, can really be challenging as you get down the road, especially if you're thinking internal succession, because I've seen this happen a lot where somebody's got in their mind that it's going to be Jim and Bob.
Did Jim and Bob know?
But have you talked to Jim and Bob? And maybe Jim and Bob were excited when you talked to them, but that was 6 or 7 years ago. Because oftentimes it could get mentioned and then never actually talked about. What does that mean? What is it that you envision? What is it that they're really looking for? And so that's a lot of my work now, is really helping that business owner get super clear on what it is that their real aspiration is, and then who are their stakeholders in achieving that. And then
Yeah.
let's bring them into the conversation.
Yeah, no, those are some essential conversations to have. And like you said, sooner rather than later,
Mhm.
because you don't know what Jim and Bob are thinking for a long term plan. Maybe they want to set up shop on their own, or, and this is my opinion, but it's good to always have a plan B and C. You
Yes.
never know if life circumstances are going to change for
For
Jim or
you,
for
or
Bob. And
for
so,
yourself.
or for yourself. Yeah, maybe your timeline just moved up from 8 years to 3 years. You don't
Yeah.
know. Um, maybe it's imminent. And so something I always talk to our clients about too is maybe you do have this plan for an internal successor, but if that's not an option, is your business in a good position to be purchased? Like
Exactly.
for you to get a premium for it? Because if if you're not easily replaceable, if your business is in your head, it's you're not going to get the true worth out of it. And so it's worth it to start doing the work years in advance to
Mhm.
make sure you can hand it off. It's kind of like an employee handbook or a manual, but for the business that you've built. And so I know you work so closely with the people in the process so
Mhm.
that they don't lose themselves or their team in the process of maximizing the dollar ROI. Um, just from the very beginning, where do you start? What does the process look like for someone that hasn't even thought about these things?
Usually, it's like I do have an engagement that I call a succession planning Kickstarter. you know,
Oh, good.
and
A lot of
it's
people
really
probably need that.
it's it's really it's as simple as time with the business owner or business partners,
Mhm.
that even just the simple act of engaging me to have these conversations, you're carving out time
Mhm.
that
Commitment.
sometimes is really, we can should on ourselves all we want, that it should be, people should be doing this, but it can be
Mhm.
really hard. And so to just be able to say, this is important enough, we're going to make this investment, and the investment is probably the costliest part of the investment is probably time, because it can feel
Yeah.
so uncomfortable sometimes to carve out that time. And so
Mhm.
those conversations are really centered on, what is it, how will you know you have had a great outcome? Is it purely the size of the check? Is it the structure of the transaction? Really, truly, like, what are the um, uh, all the elements that would make it a great outcome for you? And if you were blessed with having the perfect timeline, what would that really look like? And if there's business partners involved, it's having those conversations initially one on one, confidentially, so that they can be really honest and practice being really honest or candid about, no, this is what I
Mhm.
really want. And, with my former partners, we never really had those candid conversations or outlets. I did have a personal coach myself that I worked with going into that transaction. And it made all the difference because at least I'd really thought deeply about, what was I trying to accomplish here?
Mhm.
And what was a win going to look like for me? And how this idea that my win cannot be at anybody else's expense, but theirs can't be at mine either. And so between business partners, what is that sweet spot for both of us? Are we both on the same page in terms of what matters most? Are we both on the same page, or all of us on the same page in terms of who the other stakeholders are? And if it's I always say a fee based business, like in the investment arena in particular, there can be recurring asset based fees. And the clients that are critical to the business retaining those cash flows, what's important to them if they think that we are both exiting or all of us are exiting, or if it's just one person that, to your kind of the point that you were making earlier, if there's a perception that the business really relies on Tim, and Tim is the one that's preparing to exit. So it's really a time to help facilitate deeper, broader thinking about what their aspirations are. And then typically it'll include uh, one-on-one conversations, and I call them stakeholder interviews with their key people. And sometimes it's even spouses. What's
That's
really important to you in this whole process?
that's
And
critical, I think, because sometimes we don't know ourselves, but we do as a family unit,
yeah,
because you build your life together. So why wouldn't you include them in this conversation?
and it's like so often, the people that will resonate with this kind of work, it's like my tagline is succession planning with heart, because it's about the people the human
Mhm.
beings that are at the center of this, and the kinds of things that are able to surface out loud, um, that for some business owners, it's just like this relief of being able to be really candid about what they're worried about or what their hopes are in this situation, and yet they're still worried,
The
and
permission.
yeah, so it's just to have that time and space with somebody that is empathetic and empowering at the same time, that
Mhm.
you know I can help you design the process, kind of that best fit approach. And really, by me kind of taking in everybody's thoughts and feelings in the process, and me being able to kind of say, okay, what are the themes from what everybody has shared? And then being able to summarize that for the business owners to say, here are the themes from my conversation with you and with you and with your other stakeholders, and what stands out for you when you look at these themes relative to what you were thinking you really want to accomplish in terms of whether it's creating legacy or maximizing your return, and then we can start to think about, okay, so um, what is that? What is your real goal in this? And designing I always start with a 12-month roadmap for starting to create some momentum, whether it's developing others. I think
Mhm.
a useful analogy is just thinking about a relay race. And if you've got a business with one or two, or small handful of business owners that cover the every lane on the track, or if you've got one or two people holding all the batons and trying to cover every lane, it probably works until it doesn't. And it really doesn't work if you're looking to sell your business, because
Mhm.
somebody's going to have to take those batons or there's nothing to buy.
Right. Well, that yeah, that's exactly the point about making it scalable and maximizing the ROI, right? Whether it's your energy, your
It's
resources, your
scalable.
team, your
Yeah,
people, just making sure
yeah.
even they benefit the most from it.
And I would
Um,
say it's even before it's scalability, because that, a lot of people talk about scalability. And in reality, they haven't even really thought about continuity.
True. That's
And so
good
that's where it's like
distinction.
if you start with that idea of continuity, then you really set yourself up well for that next level, which could be scalability or being a good merger or acquisition partner for somebody that you're the missing piece of the puzzle for the collective scalability.
Why do
And
you think?
um,
Well, there's clearly value to charting out this roadmap for your business and for the people in it.
mhm.
There's obvious benefits. Why do you think more people aren't doing that? Because it's not very often that you come across an ambitious business owner that has a solid 3, 5, 10 plus year plan. There's plenty of business, operators, but
Mm.
those that view their business like an investment have a clear plan for it. It's not as common. Do people not know where to start, or why do you think
That could
this
be
isn't
part of
as
it.
common?
It's interesting because I think there are those people, I mean, you hear about startups all the time. If
Mhm.
they're in the tech arena or somewhere where it's kind of a given from the start that we're building this to achieve some kind of ROI, and the quicker the better, the bigger and the quicker the better. And there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, good for them. And yet, a lot of businesses that get started are really more service. Again, it could be you start your own law firm, or you and a handful of partners start your own law firm or accounting firm or some kind of consulting business, or accounting. I come out of the investment arena, and so there are all these professional service type companies where it's just based on getting the next client. Um,
Today, tomorrow. Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's everything's kind of oriented towards just grow. And we're all professionals that share the same skills. And you can see really large law firms that somebody will be um, named or voted in as the managing partner or whatever label the firm is using. So now that person's going to manage or lead, and maybe there's a partners committee or something. But it's like everything's so oriented towards the service, getting clients, keeping clients, and that's important too. But it's not, and they may set goals, but there's not the same level of investment in thinking about the bigger picture of the people that it takes to do that. So it's kind of a people, not an HR strategy, but it is kind of a people strategy as well. And just thinking about what does it take of me? What does it require of me to get to that next level? And oftentimes it could be I don't know where to start, or I convince myself I don't have enough. There's not enough time.
Limiting beliefs.
It's a limiting belief, and it's also candidly. I
Please.
want to say candidly, it's you've designed it this way,
Yeah. Or
or
default.
by default, right? That
Yeah.
you're so busy that you're holding all the batons. If you um, and so there's nobody running in the lane behind you, and um, so as the years tick by, if you're probably still in the first 5 to 10 years of your business, you're probably still pretty energetic. But oftentimes you talk to business owners when they're 20 years in, 20 plus years in, it starts to be challenging just purely from an energy perspective. And yet now you can find yourself in that kind of double bind, if you will, of I can't, but I have to, in terms of having other people do things. And a lot of times by the time somebody's reaching out to me, they may be frustrated, annoyed, angry even. Why aren't people, you know, fill in the blank? Well, because you've always what you just kind of designed it this way. It's so that can be one of the biggest challenges. I've even had people where they did engage, and yet even after signing an engagement letter and even making a payment, they are unable or unwilling to find the time to actually do the work. And so, and it's not about blaming anybody. It's just your calendar reflects your values. And at some point,
That
it's
is
probably
true.
going to be so important. And hopefully, that point will not be at a moment where the catalyst is actually something um, really hard.
Yeah.
So, everybody, I think, as a business owner, is going to struggle with time management to a certain degree. There may be a few people out there that are magically good at it. It was a challenge for me, and even in my coaching practice, it's still probably one of my greatest challenges. But if something is truly important, it requires discernment. It requires, I don't know, courage, maybe
Definitely.
maybe a dose of maturity to just say, okay, I'm going to have to really challenge myself on this and make this happen. Because I think one of the other missed opportunities is people getting to be really effective at delegation. And that can be
True.
something to, that alone could be something worth getting some coaching on, and some guidance and encouragement, because your people could even be starved for getting more experience and having that opportunity. And that's where I see a lot when younger professionals leave and start their own. It's almost always because why not? I mean, I might as well, because nothing's going to happen here.
That's a very good point. Transparency goes a long way because I'm sure
Mhm.
those younger individuals would have had they known there was a carrot or had they known there was potential, they may have invested more in their prior workplace, this Bob or
Mhm.
Jim that
Yeah.
suddenly left. But we've gone through that exercise. We go through it at least annually, but a little bit more often just as the need arises. But is this business still providing what I wanted out of it, or is it on the roadmap to provide what we want out of it?
Yeah.
What is the exit plan? What is the people plan behind it? And then at first, we were nervous to be completely transparent with the whole team about here's what we want out of this business, here's the dollar we want to hit. Um, and internally, as to your point of you're communicating even if you're not saying anything, I always thought it was obvious. Well, yes, of course, if we're profitable, if we meet these goals, of course we're going to share that with our team, because unless we had someone to delegate to, it never would have happened at this
Mhm.
level. And that's an assumption I made just because I know my own thoughts.
Mhm.
But then having that transparency with the team, it was like they had no idea. And
Yeah.
so, and it created almost this instant buy-in of, yes, let's rally together. We're going to have this goal for the end of, this upcoming tertial, this goal for the end of the year. And so I, yeah, to your point, that transparency, I think, fosters so much of that relationship
Yeah.
stickiness,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, that's priceless.
And I think too, it's real engagement where this may sound a little weird, but where it's not purely transactional,
That's not
where,
weird.
it's like carrots can be good, but especially now, I just feel like there's a lot of younger professionals that don't find the old style carrots all that inspirational.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's as a business owner or just as a business leader, if you're not one of the shareholders, but maybe you still have a team that you lead or manage, what could be possible when you engage with your people with an intention to really understand what makes them tick, what
Mm-hmm.
excites them? Is there a part of the business that they're most interested in or curious about? Um, what do they love? What do they not love about their
Mm-hmm.
role
It's
as it is
important.
now? And not be afraid to learn these things so that you have the opportunity to say, um, hey, even one of the business owners or one of the partners or one of the shareholders is covering 4 lanes on the track right now. It's like, who might actually really enjoy lining up in that lane and running a lap
Mm-hmm.
just for the experience?
Yeah. No,
And,
that's great.
and it's like, as a business owner, the continuity, the peace of mind relative to continuity becomes that much greater when you've got some people that are really ready to catch that baton if you need it because they've practiced. They've had some time running on that lane. Doesn't mean that you're ready to pass the baton today, but you may not get to plan that.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great point. I have no doubt that anybody listening to this is thinking, either shoot, I don't know what my goals are, I don't know what my magic wand exit is, or I need to start working towards these things now. And with the limited time that most business owners have, it's not surprising that they feel overwhelmed when they say, okay, I'm going to set aside an hour, and then the hour appears and they're thinking, what do I do that's actually going to be productive and move me along? And that's why you work with someone that's good at this, that's done this before, because then you can make sure that time is used wisely and not just in six different directions. I know I've seen some great, collateral reference materials of yours. Before we wrap up here, can you share how people can find you, contact you, get any resources that you might have?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is a great place to start. You can find me on LinkedIn, and then also my website, which is very creatively named LaurieNichols.com. So,
So you only have to make one Google search, is what you're saying.
yes, yes. So LaurieNichols.com, and then also feel free. Anybody can feel free to email me at Laurie@LaurieNichols.com. Um,
Easy.
yeah, and it's like it's it's just knowing that um, having a business is not for the faint of heart, but having a business and really bringing your heart to it can make all the difference in terms of achieving even great financial goals. And it's like you you deserve to have somebody be there and hear your deepest thoughts and really empower you in this process, and it'd be a privilege to be a resource for you or anybody in your audience.
Thank you. I
Thank you for
appreciate
this.
it. I really appreciate you joining today. I don't think that this arena is given enough attention, so I'm glad I could have you. And until next time, thank you for tuning in to the Accelerator.